Hey guys, Trey here. Wanted to do another severe weather discussion today. We have an enhanced risk from the SPC out for much of southern and central Texas into northwest Texas and southern Oklahoma, even including the southern parts of the Oklahoma City metro area, including the city of Norman. Surrounded by a slight risk that goes all the way down to the Texas Gulf Coast near Corpus Christi, all the way up through the Tulsa area and over toward Lubbock, Midland, Fort Stockton areas down into the Big Bend region of Texas. We also have a slight risk up in Colorado, northeast Colorado into western Nebraska. Going to be focusing on the southern plains severe weather threat today, but there is a slight risk up there, 2% tornado risk with a wind and hail threat up there as well. If you are interested in those areas, just be aware that there is a risk up there today. It is fairly marginal, um, not really a textbook Colorado chase day, but going to focus today in this video on the Southern Plains severe weather threat, particularly this enhanced risk area. So today's forecast is really pretty simple, but there's a lot of different potential outcomes for this event. Really, it's going to be where does the dry line intersect with this outflow boundary from this huge complex of thunderstorms this morning. You can see right here this outflow boundary surging southward right now from this complex here in northeast Oklahoma, southeast Kansas. It's kind of an interesting boundary. There's another sort of outflow area up in here from these storms in northern Oklahoma, right on the Kansas-Oklahoma border. But this is the main outflow boundary here from the early morning storms near the Tulsa area. If we go to radar, you can get a better picture of those. Lots of storms up here. This is off the Tulsa radar. Just a massive blob of thunderstorms. You can see that outflow boundary out ahead right here, sort of surging southward from the northern portion of this convective complex, and then we also have that boundary we saw on satellite out here stretching well into Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma ahead of these storms. So where do these boundaries set up? That is going to be the main uncertainty with today's forecast. Right now, it's still surging southward, and really no signs of it slowing down as of yet. But there is some evidence that it might slow down later on. Let's take a look at the surface pattern. So this is the most recent surface analysis from the UCAR site. We see we have a little bit of a cyclonic circulation right here, a little bit of a surface low right here over western Oklahoma. We have a very rich air mass. You see 70s dew points all the way up to the Oklahoma City metro area, basically, just east of there near Shawnee. We have 74 over 70 there, 71 over 71 in Enid, but lots of very upper 60s to low 70s dew points out here over much of Texas. Right here, let's see if we can figure out where the dry line is. We have 65 dew points here in Canadian, Pampa 63, decreasing to mid-50s out here in the western Texas Panhandle. So I would assume it goes kind of something like this, roughly, just at first glance. It's kind of hard to tell here. It's probably pretty diffuse, but there is some moisture gradient in here. We have 69 over 33 here, just south of Amarillo. So that might be a case where we have a little bit of a dry line bulge there, and it goes something up like that into the Oklahoma Panhandle. But there's the dry line. It should slosh a little bit east as the day progresses. And again, we have that convective outflow here. You can see it in the surface analysis. We have southeasterly winds here. McAllister, 72 over 67 with a southeasterly surface wind. Same thing at this station, and then we shift to a pretty much due easterly wind here. So our outflow boundary is kind of somewhere right in this region, somewhere right in there. And wherever that stalls, if it does, and it kind of intersects with that dry line, is going to be where our favored point for maybe a possible tornadic storm or two today. But that is still the uncertainty. We still don't know what's going to happen. The models have been all over this morning, and they usually don't handle these kind of mesoscale kind of features very well at all. So there is some evidence that this might stall. Models are showing, we'll take you to the wrap here. We'll go to the surface analysis product here and zoom into the planes. So if we look at, let's take a look first at our surface map. We said we had a little bit of a cyclonic circulation there in western Oklahoma. There's a kind of a broader sort of lower pressure area here over the western Texas region. That is forecast to get a little bit more well-defined throughout the day. So as we go throughout the day, we get that surface low to develop out here over West Texas, kind of consolidate here over the Panhandle, and then that outflow is going to surge south, and that's going to have a major consequences on what our severe weather threat's going to be. So if we have this surface low sort of deepen out here, we should expect winds to back and maybe strengthen a little bit. 15, maybe 20 knots at the surface if we're lucky. This boundary, it's not moving all that fast. It's surging pretty good, but probably no more than 20 knots or so. So if we get 20 knot winds moving into a 20 knot southerly winds moving into a boundary that's moving from the north to the south at 20 knots, well, it's going to stall. Where is it going to stall? Still, there's a question of will it stall. 20 knots might be a little bit generous here. Models yesterday were showing a really nice surface low over here in western Oklahoma, really strengthening and backing those winds. That not so much the case today. The surface low out here now in the southeast New Mexico, western Texas, southwest Texas Panhandle region. So a little bit different, a little bit of a few changes this morning. So still, I mean, this is a forecast that it's 10 a.m. on the day of the forecast we're making, and we still have lots of uncertainties left. But let's go ahead and take a look at the background pattern and see if we can get a little more information here. Pretty much zonal flow here. We have this kind of subtle shortwave, subtle wave here moving through the flow. Little bit weak, a little bit on the weak side. 25 knots here over Oklahoma and into the Texas Panhandle, with even weaker winds out here to the southwest. So this is not what we'd like to see in May if we're excited about severe weather. We usually see much stronger troughs than this, those bowling ball type troughs we see out over the western part of the continental United States. This is more of a kind of a June pattern, more of a summertime pattern that we're seeing here in the middle of May. So we have this westerly flow, a little bit of a wave here. Flow is fairly weak aloft, 25. Maybe we can eke out 30 knots over here. If we go to 700, look for our short waves. You could argue there's one up here in the central high plains, and it's just not really that well defined. This is much more of a quiescent sort of summertime MCS kind of pattern. Let's go down to 850. We do have a nice low-level jet here. If we zoom into our southern plains sector, nice 30 to 35 knot low-level jet here over western and central Oklahoma. That is forecast to pretty much go away throughout the day. So this does not bode well for a tornado threat, which is a good thing considering the Oklahoma City metro area is in play here today. But if we have an outflow boundary, that is going to locally enhance the wind shear. So we're this pretty much weak bulk shear over this entire region. Actually, mesoanalysis showing a little bit stronger bulk shear later on today, 40, 45 knots. So that's a little bit more than I was expecting, given the current upper air progs. So that is a little bit interesting. Generally, though, when we have weaker flow and we have an outflow boundary, the overall bulk shear, especially the low-level shear, is enhanced by the local backing along that boundary. If we go back to our surface map here, our outflow boundary, again, southeasterly winds to the south of it, then we back those winds really nicely to easterly. So lots of enhanced backing, some vorticity along this boundary. So this will help enhance the pretty marginal wind shear already. And we could have a tornado threat later on today here, wherever this boundary sets up, if it stalls. So this is an interesting development, though. RAP mesoanalysis showing 40, 45 knots of shear over parts of Oklahoma here. That is interesting. If we get that to happen, we get storms to fire along that boundary with the enhanced low-level shear, there could be a tornado threat with those. Effective helicity is decent right now. Um, Potentially could approach about 200 meters square per second squared as we go throughout the day in parts of southern Oklahoma ahead of this outflow boundary. Um, let's take a look at some soundings from across the region. We have our Norman sounding, Oklahoma City basically, 12Z this morning. Lots of elevated instability here. We already have mixed layer CAPE of over 2,000 joules per kilogram at 7 a.m. this morning. So that is only forecast to increase throughout the day as temperatures warm into the upper 80s, maybe even the low 90s. And we get CAPE values forecast to be 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 joules per kilogram. That is very, very high for this time of year. But notice our morning wind profile. Look at this, just weak winds here. There's no wind barbs here between about 600 millibars and about 300 millibars. I don't know if that's how they signify calm winds on this sounding. Certainly by the hodograph here, it does appear that though that might be an error in the sounding. We were seeing about 10-20 knots here at 5 kilometers, 5-6 kilometers. So that could be an error right there in the sounding. But overall, not a great long type of hodograph we like to see for severe weather here in May. We like to see large, long clockwise looping hodographs, and we just don't have that today. Here's the Dallas-Fort Worth sounding, a very chaotic hodograph once again, but again, lots of elevated instability. Stable layer here at the surface. That should erode rapidly today as temperatures warm. Let's take a look maybe at the Midland sounding. Even more elevated instability, about 3,000 joules per kilogram, but an even worse hodograph, very chaotic. So overall, weak shear, but we did have some sense of that increasing throughout the day according to our RAP meso analysis. Let's take a look at the actual RAP model here. This is the 12Z RAP. Here's our 500 millibar flow. Forecast throughout the day. We see it actually weakens throughout the day. That's not good. 10 knots at 500 millibars over Oklahoma City. May at 0Z, 3Z, May 15th and 16th. That is not what we look for severe weather on the plains in May. So that is concerning, definitely concerning. Let's go down to 850, see if we can get a low-level jet to develop. And there is some semblance of an increase in low-level jet near sunset. Increases to about 30 knots here according to this particular model, right here from about Oklahoma City southward. But still nothing mind-boggling here. Yep, I have to go take my COVID test because we are going to be able to go out and use RAXPOL, our mobile radar at OU, starting May 20th. So got to make sure we are all healthy and ready to go for that before we get out in RAXPOL. Here's our surface product, surface map. Again, we just looked at this, the surface low. You can see where that outflow is. It just continues to surge, and that's my fear today. Winds at the surface not going to increase as much as we thought. So we're just going to get lots of stable air behind this, crashing, undercut storms that fire on this boundary, especially with shear weakening to 10 knots. But again, RAP meso analysis was pretty bold with increasing shear throughout the day. That is valid at 21Z, so 4 p.m. we have 40-45 knots. So if this verifies, would not be surprised to see a potential supercell or two here in central and southern Oklahoma if that boundary can stall. That's again if the boundary can stall. We have nice moisture, great moisture, low to mid 70s dew points here. Let's take a sounding here. Let's go ahead of the outflow. Let's go just ahead of this outflow boundary, just so we can get kind of a clean sounding. Yeah, you can see just massive CAPE, mixed layer CAPE, almost 5,000 joules per kilogram. Large temperature dew point spreads, 93/69, so very, very minimal hodographs here. So I would expect multi-cells to be the main mode today. But again, if that outflow boundary can stall, which we still don't know if that's going to do, if it's going to do that yet, we could see an enhancement of shear and maybe some supercell structures along that outflow boundary. But this screams to me summertime MCS kind of scenario. You just have weak shear, multi-cells. Again, we talked about in our video from a couple days ago that weak shear overall usually means the production of downdrafts. That precipitation cannot fall out away from the updraft, as we see in supercells in strongly sheared environments. These are your more pulse-type thunderstorms. They don't last quite as long. They produce big downdrafts, and those cold pools are going to congeal, and you'll get just huge MCS production. And that looks to be the case today if these soundings and photographs verify. Let's take a look at some convective allowing model output. Again, take these with a grain of salt. They never handle these kind of mesoscale type things well. So here's the 12Z. Let's go to the most recent HRRR run, 13Z. 14Z is just coming in now. So this is the 13Z HRRR run. We go throughout the day. Those storms continue to move south. That boundary continues to move south, and we get storms to fire up here in northwest Texas, southern Texas Panhandle, maybe as far south as Lubbock and Midland. And then we get storms to fire out here in central Oklahoma. Now, look at that, though. Just completely congeals into just a mess. Complete MCS production. There's kind of one kind of continuation from the morning storms with some new development here on the western flank, and then this kind of congeals quickly into an MCS as well down in southwest Texas. So that, as far as the tornado threat goes, is not great. Perhaps we could see some very large hail in the initial stages of growth, given our very large cape, steep lapse rates aloft. Again, let's take a sounding out here. You can see that big cape again, over almost 5,000 joules per kilogram right here. But we have steep lapse rates aloft, surface to 3 lapse rate 9.3, almost 9 throughout the rest of the atmosphere here. So very, very steep lapse rates aloft. Very large cape, should favor large hail, at least in the initial stages before the downdrafts dominate, and then we'll get more of a damaging wind threat here as we go into the evening hours as this MCS happens. Let's take a look at the WRF ARW model real quick, and then the NISL WRF. So the 12Z run. Again, you can see this is completely different from what the HRRR was showing. This is just completely different. These models are handling things way differently. So we get storms to fire about 4 or 5 o'clock, and they kind of just completely congeal into an MCS really quickly. And you can see the outflow boundary surging out ahead. It means storms will be undercut. Mainly a damaging wind threat with these storms. NSSL WRF. Again, another different picture from what we saw from the previous two models. So cams just do not handle these kind of setups well. There's that boundary right there. Kind of slows down there in central Oklahoma, and we get storms to fire kind of somewhat isolated here by about 5 p.m. So I could see maybe a brief tornado threat out of these. But again, with the weak shear, if the wrap is correct, upper winds weaken as we go through the day, and we just get complete MCS formation here. Very, very messy storm mode. Something we normally see in mid to late June rather than the middle of May. But this pattern just not very conducive for tornadic supercells. So all in all, I think today the main threat is going to be damaging winds. I think there will be a small window for severe hail. The SPC's outlined kind of a very narrow 30% corridor from Oklahoma City down toward just east of Lubbock and down toward Midland with a 15 hash surrounding that. I think we could get some significant severe hail very early on in the first hour or two of storm formation before they really congeal in this kind of weaker shear environment. Wind threat, though, is going to be the main risk for today's storms. 30 hatched here from the Del Rio area all the way up to Oklahoma City. Just looks like a classic summertime MCS kind of day, where you have weak shear, cold pools congeal, and you get just a couple of big MCSs, a very messy storm mode. Now, if the RAP mesoanalysis is right, we saw that kind of increase in bulk shear throughout the day. Just updated, actually, the new run. We still have decent shear here. If we can get storms to fire here in southwest, south central Oklahoma in that better shear environment, and if that outflow boundary stalls, I could see a threat for a tornado or two if in the early stages of storm growth. We have very, very large cape that can help overcome some of the weaker shear. Plus you have the enhanced backing along of the winds at the surface along the boundary. Could see maybe a brief tornado threat if that boundary stalls, maybe even a landspout or two if it stalls. Let's look at 0 to 3 CAPE real quick. This is a good parameter set to use to diagnose land spout potential. Vorticity, the spin near the surface. We can get little spin near the surface coupled with strong instability in the low levels. Really stretches those eddies, that vorticity at the surface, and can give you land spouts if you get updrafts co-located with that surface vorticity. We see we do have an increase throughout the day, over 100 joules per kilogram of 0 to 3 CAPE, with coinciding with some vorticity. So maybe a land spout threat if that outflow boundary can stall. But again, I think it's going to be mainly an MCS kind of day. Maybe a brief window for a supercell or two near that boundary if it stalls. But again, that is going to be the thing to monitor throughout the day. Let's go back to the satellite and show you. Let's refresh here and show you that boundary just sagging south pretty fast this morning. So you're going to have to watch satellite closely today. You can throw the cams out today. They're just pretty much agreeing that an MCS scenario is going to be the main thing today, but looks like they're not handling things too well. Just going to have to watch the odds and the satellite throughout the day. If you're chasing today, good luck. Stay safe out there. Thank you for watching, and I will see you under the next meso.